All right. Good afternoon. This is Bonnie McFarland of the LCAP State and Federal Programs Unit, and I'm pleased to invite you to day 3 of our LCAP workshop series for this year. Day 3 was added after we completed day 1. We looked at some of the issues and challenges that you've been dealing with in the past year. And one definitely was assessment and accountability metrics, and developing those outcomes in the absence of some of the data that you typically use. So working with our project director for the assessment literacy unit, Evan Bartelheim, he offered to help us out. He helped with a brief overview at our last day 2, but then he offered to go in depth today and look more closely at metrics and how you can measure student outcomes in your LCAP. So we will be hearing from him. Also, we now have more information for you and closer to finalize the ELCAP system. So Rachel Garcia will be giving you an update on that and giving you some important information about how to access the system and how the changes for this year. So that's what to expect for the next hour and a half, and we're happy you can join us. Let's take a look at the next slide. This is our agenda. You can see it's short, but there's a lot packed in there. First of all, Evan's going to be talking about the local indicators and how to unpack those. It's sort of a treasure chest that doesn't always get unpacked. Next, they'll look at identifying and locating the required metrics for the required LCAP outcomes, where the data is and how you can access that. So he'll be walking us through that. And then, as I said, finally, Rachel Garcia will take us through the ELCAP system. So on the next slide, just a reminder, we'll try to answer questions throughout today. Evan is joined by Hillary Weissman from his team, and between the two of them, they'll be trying to respond to your questions, those they can, and any questions we don't get answered today, we'll be following up with a Q&A after the meeting. There are some questions we need to look into more deeply. All right, so I think that is it, and I'm going to turn it, and Evan's going to jump right in and start looking at the indicators. Thank you so much, Evan. We really appreciate your collaboration on this.
Thanks, Bonnie. And yeah, just to reiterate, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. Hillary Weissman, my colleague in the Accountability and Data Literacy Unit, we'll try to answer as we go. And really, I just wanted to start with talking a little bit about the kind of genesis. I think a couple of years back when we first looked at the creating a tool, when Jessica Conkle was our accountability and assessment project director, we found that people were really responsive to it. Like, where are all these data points? And so we updated that because things are always changing in terms of where things are, as you well know. But then also, you know, the local indicators, I think we started realizing there's some nuances around the local indicators, and we wanted to really be able to talk about those. So just a refresher about what is a local indicator, what's a state indicator. On the dashboard, the state indicators are those for priorities 4, 5, 6, and 8. So the academic performance indicators for ELA and math, the English learner progress indicator, chronic absenteeism, graduation rate for priority 5, suspension rate for school climate, and then the college and career indicator for priority 8. Then the local indicators, and by the way, there's just an update yesterday as to what will be on the dashboard in fall 2022. We won't be able to see the college and career indicator in the fall of 2022 because the current seniors, who will be the class of 2022, didn't take the CASP in a uniform manner when they were 11th graders last year. So probably what we'll get again is a college and career measures report. But we'll see the college and career indicator reappear on the dashboard with status only in fall of 2023. Everything else, however, will be reflected on the dashboard in the fall. Then the local indicators, which include the priority 1, which is the basics, teachers, instructional materials, and facilities, the implementation of state standards, priority 2, priority 3, the parent and family engagement, and then priority 6, which is that double one. You have both a state indicator and then the local indicator for local climate survey, and finally, priority 7, which is the access to a broad course of study. So we're going to take a look at the 5 local indicators to start off. We'll be providing you with a brief description of what is required for each of these. And then we're going to talk about some key considerations for some of them that should be understood by LEAs when you're undertaking the local indicator process, just some nuances that we think are important to know. We're also going to be sharing a resource that we created to supplement the local indicator quick guide. We think you'll find that helpful. And ultimately, our goal is really to help you be able to better tell your stories on the local indicators by capturing first the right data for your analysis and then responding to the local indicator prompts in a way that's clear and meaningful for your community. I just saw a question. I'll answer real quickly. Angie, we won't be having the college and career indicator on the dashboard next fall. That's the only one that they won't be able to generate in the fall. And note that the local indicators, and we're starting with these because actually within the local indicators, I find this kind of interesting. There are LCAP metrics really informing the local indicators, and you kind of have a little discretion as to what you're picking. So I think that understanding the local indicators and what data is used to inform them can help you pick the right indicators that are in your LCAPs. And you probably have already identified LCAPs, so you had some baselines last year, but you may find as you're going through the local indicator process that there's a data point, maybe it's another question on a survey that you feel really taps into something. If you're meaningfully engaging with your educational partners and your LCAP committees, you may find that the local indicator process points to, wow, this is a really key indicator within the survey. We should include this. And so you may want to add something like that. But it's really within the local indicators, you have a lot of flexibility around what data to choose to inform it. But ultimately, you do have to whittle down what indicators you're going to add or what pieces of the indicator you're going to add as actual metrics. So important to start that, and I just think that it's a good place to jump over, is don't duplicate your efforts. This process, the local indicator process, really shouldn't be seen as something that's in addition to the LCAP. As an LEA, you should be identifying data, measures, and tools to track progress on each of your local indicators that are already part of your LCAP metrics, right? So that they're not something other than. And then you should incorporate the evaluation of local indicator data into the work of analyzing and planning for the LCAP. Use your existing committees to the extent that you can. And maybe in some cases, you might want to have a specialized committee to look at, say, school climate, because that's probably a big one for you. But really, it's not supposed to be something over and above. Also, you want to select some specific measures that inform the local indicators that you'll include as those representative metrics. You probably have, but again, you can always augment if you find something more useful to add. So at this point, I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Hillary, and she's going to kind of walk us through each of these. And I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions related to any of these, I'm happy to, we'll pause and respond between these. So Hillary.
All righty. Thank you, Evan, and happy Thursday to everyone. Once again, thank you, Evan, for monitoring the chat as I shuffle my screen around here to make sure I can see everything. And once again, and as a reminder and a refresher, the following is a timeline for local indicators, data collection, data evaluation, data outcomes that inform the 2022 and 2023 LCAP, in addition to the presentation of local indicators outcome data in conjunction with the LCAP adoption to the local governing board before the final submission of local indicator information collected in the 2021 and 2022 for the fall 2022 dashboard. Based upon this timeline, hopefully, a plan has already been established and you're kind of moving into the collection of evidence, and you're in the middle of collecting and evaluating this evidence for the local indicator and are gearing up to use that outcome data to inform your 2022-2023 LCAP during the month of May, as I can't believe it's almost going to be April here and shortly. So as Evan mentioned previously, we've created a tool sort of as a supplement to the local indicator quick guide. Our tool's intent is really to enhance the indicator guide by providing a sort of crosswalk within each indicator that acts like a checklist and very user-friendly. And in essence, the tool breaks down each indicator into 4 quadrants, consisting of a summary of the processes associated with the indicator, suggested data sources, possible questions to enhance your inquiry, and/or points for clarity and accuracy, and lastly, key elements to include in your narrative responses. I tend to feel that the most substantial part of this tool really lies within the section of possible questions to enhance your analysis portion. An example, if I had to kind of zoom in on one, let's say within priority one, maybe appropriately assign teachers access to curriculum, aligned instructional materials, and safe, clean, and functional schools. One of the potential questions that has been included in this tool kind of asks about educator equity gaps, should one exist, and the potential contributing factors to that gap. The question really provides you like a moment to pause and to do a little bit of reflection and some analysis with that equity lens in mind. And in this regards, the tool can be appreciated because of its thoroughness and kind of comprehensiveness. Next slide, please. So performance standards for local indicators. The State Board of Education approves standards for the local indicators that support a local educational agency in measuring and reporting progress within the appropriate priority area. The approved performance standards require an LEA to annually measure its progress in meeting the requirements of the local control funding formula priority, report the results as part of a non-consent item at a regularly scheduled public meeting of local governing board or body in conjunction with the adoption of the local control and accountability plan, report results to the public through the dashboard utilizing the State Board Education adopted self-reflection tools for each local indicator.
Hillary, I just want to interject real quick. And I want to stop here just because this is what leads to that determination of met, not met. And for the last couple of years, we haven't had to report out self-report. That's a self-selected criteria, met, not met. And these are the criteria by which you measure it. And last year, it was a very complicated year and a lot was going on, but a lot of LEAs were either had not reported or had not actually submitted their local indicators in conjunction with the LCAP, or then missed the deadline for submission. I know we were scrambling at the last minute to get a lot of local indicators submitted. So these are the criteria. So just be mindful of this, the determination for met, not met, you kind of have to make sure you do that this year, because last year you were, there was a waiver with the dashboard. Yeah, AB 130 made it not necessary to report yourself as not met, but this year that's no longer a factor. So make sure you adhere to these, make sure it's presented to the board, you've undertaken the process, and that you submit it on time for the deadline. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, thank you, sir. We move on to the next one, priority one, basic conditions. With a local indicator for basic conditions, the LEA uses locally available information to measure progress in 3 areas. One of them, appropriately assigned teachers, the subcategory misassigned teachers of ELs, total teachers misassigned, and vacancies. Additionally, access to curriculum-aligned instructional materials, subsection with the students without their own copy of materials at home or at school. And lastly, the safe, clean, and functional schools facilities, instances of facilities in less than good repair. As we move along, we look at the special considerations for priority one within the basic conditions. Note the definitions of appropriately assigned teachers are based on federal definitions adopted by the State Board of Education in November of 2019. These definitions differ from what is identified as misassigned during the assignment monitoring process. Data reflecting the appropriate assignment of teachers based on the State Board Education adopted definitions will be released by the California Department of Education soon. And LEAs should use these data rather than relying on self-reporting to avoid discrepancies.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, I think if you're watching the state board meeting yesterday, you may have heard Cindy Cazanes from the CDE talking about just how incredibly complicated the data set that they're about to provide, and hence it's delayed. So if you're waiting for your SARC to be auto-populated with the teacher misassignment data, you're still waiting. That was supposed to happen in February. Obviously, we're well into March. But that really points to the nature of how complex it is. You're merging both Calpads data with CTC data, and then looking also at students who are assigned specific teachers to determine misassignments. And then you're filtering through the lens of these federal definitions for misassignment, which really aren't clear to anybody in the field, and they acknowledge that. So I really in the past, it's really been largely a self-reported process. And you probably still could do some self-reporting, but I don't think it's wise because I think there's going to be some significant discrepancies based on the federal definitions that most HR people just aren't as familiar with. I think nobody's really completely got them, memorized yet. So this data set should be forthcoming, and I would definitely take a look at it. That'll be what you want to guide to include in your local indicator process.
I'm not sure because I can't see the chat, Evan, if we've had any questions roll in. I wanted to take a moment.
We just had, the one question is, do you know when we can anticipate clarification on misassigned teachers for purposes of report on the LCAP federal versus state? So that's the data set we're expecting on Jeanette. That should be hopefully out soon, within the next month or so, and that's going to be driven by the federal definitions. A good point, though, that they made, that there are actually slightly different expectations for Williams, for the LCAP federal addendum, teacher equity. So what will be produced in this upcoming data set will be what would be required for the LCAP, which technically is part of the federal accountability system. So that it's what we submitted in our ESSA plan. The data set, Angie asked where the data set will be posted. I expect it to be posted. First of all, I think there's going to be a pretty big rollout. There are a lot of groups that are very interested in this data. There's a lot of conversation at the state board meeting yesterday about how teacher misassignment data will be reflected on the dashboard in the future. But I do believe there'll be a big rollout. You'll undoubtedly hear about it if you're the accountability coordinator for your LEA. And I suspect it'll be posted to DataQuest, but it might be available also in a downloadable data file from the CDE. I'll definitely be monitoring, and we'll share that with the LCAP team as soon as it comes out.
Let's move along here. Priority 2, the implementation of state standards. LEAs may provide a narrative summary of their progress in the implementation of state academic standards based on locally selected measures or tools. Option 1, or complete a self-reflection tool. Option 2, rating itself in 5 areas. The first being progress in providing professional learning for teaching to academic standards and/or curriculum frameworks adopted by the State Board of Education in ELA, ELD, math, science, history, social science. The second is progress in making instructional materials that are aligned to these adopted academic standards and/or curriculum frameworks. The third one is the implementing policies or programs to support staff in identifying areas where they can improve in delivering instruction in these standard frameworks. The fourth is the implementing other academic standards, CTE, physical education, visual and performing arts, world language health, adopted by the State Board for all students. And lastly, engage in the following activities with teachers and school administrators, be identifying professional learning needs of groups of teachers and staff, identifying professional learning needs of individual teachers, providing support for teachers on the standards that they have not yet mastered. So we move along to priority 3, parent and family engagement. Based on the evaluation of data, including educational partner input, an LEA uses this self-reflection tool to report on its progress, successes, and areas of need related to family engagement policies, programs, and practices. This tool will enable the LEA to engage in continuous improvement and determine next steps to make improvements in the areas identified. The results of the process should be used to inform the LCAP and its development process, including assessing prior year's goals, actions, and services, and modifying future goals, actions, and services in the LCAP. As we look at the 2 key considerations for priority 3, parent and family engagement that came out, there's an emphasis, as you can see, first one here, identify the diverse educational partners that need to participate in the self-reflection process in order to ensure input from all groups of families, staff, and students in the LEA, including families specifically of unduplicated students and families of individuals with exceptional needs, as well as families of underrepresented students. Secondly, engage educational partners in determining what data and information will be considered to complete the self-reflection tool. LEA should consider how the practices apply to families of all student groups, including families of unduplicated students and families of individuals with exceptional needs, as well as families of underrepresented students. And when you take a look at the local indicator tool that we're including, there are several suggested data points for consideration, such as graduation rates, chronic absenteeism rates, and/or dropout rates. However, we've included some other data points that you can leverage, such as empathy interviews, WASC focus groups, and their feedback, in addition to other advisory committees. These were included because these forms of data can strengthen your data analysis process and support a strong data narrative around building relationships, partnerships, and seeking input when making decisions.
I'd just like to add too to this slide, the big change here in terms of engaging with the partner. I mean, I think this is a big change, and I don't want to suggest that no one is actually engaging their partners in this process. But it was clear that the working group around the parent and family engagement was concerned that it was a lot of times the LEA, the cabinet or senior leadership would lock themselves away in a room and look at the data that they had, whether it's survey data or other data, and would then make a determination, would fill out the self-reflection tool. So they really felt that it was important to have actual families and parents in the room making this process. So to the extent that the process around the local indicators may ultimately, if you adhere to it, you're fine. But if you don't adhere to it, if you do have people who don't feel like they're engaged or there's not transparency around the engagement of parents around this, I would caution you, because I think this would be subject to a UCP. And we have seen instances where a UCP would even bring in, a state auditor can be brought in to look at the processes around engagement for various plans. So I don't think I'm speaking out of line to suggest that this is really an effort to kind of solidify the efforts to engage partners. So make sure you bring parents in and families in for this process. That's the big key takeaway here. Just one quick question related back to the local indicator number 1. Anjanette asked a great question. Is there a possibility for developing a chart that defines SARC teacher misassignments versus Williams versus the federal at some point that we can share with HR LCAP data teams? Actually, I believe that our colleagues at the CDE are going to produce something like that. I've been on the phone with the folks from the Teacher Equity Division's Title I folks who are responsible. And I know they're trying to sort this out, because you do really need a crosswalk to understand the difference. We don't ask for ineffective teachers for the LCAP, but we do ask for ineffective teachers for the federal addendum. So I will stay apprised of that. I don't know if I'd want to tread into that water because it is so complicated right now, but that's definitely a tool that the state realizes people need some help with.
All righty. So as we move forward, we're into priority 6, school climate. It's asked to provide a narrative summary of the local administration and analysis of a local climate survey that captures a valid measure of student perceptions of school safety and connectedness. With regards to data, reflect on key learnings from the survey results and share with the LEA what's been learned. With regards to meaning, what do the disaggregated results, if applicable, of the survey and other data collection methods reveal about schools in the LEA, such as areas of strength or growth, challenges, and barriers? And lastly, the use, what revisions, decisions, or actions has or will the LEA implement in response to the results for continuous improvement purposes, and why? If you have already implemented actions, did you see the results you were seeking or anticipated? As we move along to the special considerations within priority 6 for school climate, 2 of them to note are administer the survey to students in at least one grade within the grade spans that the LEA serves. The second, school climate is a multifaceted and important measure. To provide a more complete view, consider identifying differences among student groups, an analysis of a subset of specific items on a local survey, and additional data collection tools that are particularly relevant to school conditions and climates. Per the California Educational Code 52060, Section D6, specifies other local measures, including surveys of pupils, parents, and teachers on the sense of safety and school connectedness. And I know, Evan, I may not capture it as well as you shared with me, but I know that you like to use a photography analogy here, and you have to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm not sure who else who's listening, if you've heard of the photography analogy, but imagine if you gave a camera to your teachers, to your students and your parents, and you asked them to take a picture of picture of a campus, somewhere on the campus that best captures the essence of their school. And then try to imagine the results, right? Some might take a picture and it could be of the football field, could be of the pool, could be of the quad. Some may even be in a classroom. And some might even be taken of a picture of a broken toilet in a bathroom. The idea of going beyond a survey kind of provides an opportunity to understand the scope and experiences and expectations that staff have and students have. In our tool, we try to provide a checklist of other suggested data sources that can sort of support the drilling down and better understanding the sense of a school connectedness and safety that they're experiencing. And Evan, I'm not sure if you want to emphasize something there or clarify the photograph analogy, but I was trying to steal it from you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great analogy. I just imagine the collage that we would put together, right? And I think that Dr. Weissman and I did a little bit of a deep dive into school climate as part of this grant we were applying for with the CDE. And really what came out of it was just how limited our surveys are, even well-designed surveys, in terms of generating really meaningful view of what our school climate is. And you can imagine why. It's really the response that people provide may be limited. They may not feel engaged, but you're definitely going to get different perspectives, and you're trying to build this collage of what your school climate is from something that's really two-dimensional, when in fact school climate's a real three-dimensional complicated process. So the extent to which you can involve more than just your students to build out to inform your LCAP, your local indicator for school climate, I think it's critical. And there is a slight disconnect in so much as really the local indicator only requires that you administer the survey to students, but in fact the ed code specifies for the purposes of the LCAP that you include measures of pupils, parents, and teachers on the sense of safety and school connectedness. So it's a little bit of a disconnect. But I think if you're building a very informed school climate vision, then the more data you bring in, the more robust that image will be and the more helpful it'll be. So I would recommend not stopping at simply the rote administration of a survey to one grade within the grade spans, and try to expand it to get a more holistic view.
Thank you. Moving along here to priority 7, access to a broad course of study. Identify the measures the LEA is using to track the extent to which all students have access to and are enrolled in a broad course of study based on grade spans, unduplicated student groups, and individuals with exceptional needs served. Using the selected measures, summarize the extent to which all students have access to and are enrolled in a broad course of study. Identify any differences across school sites and student groups, and describe progress over time in the extent to which all students have access to and are enrolled in a broad course of study. Identify the barriers preventing the LEA from providing access to a broad course of study for all students. And lastly, based on results of the selected measures, identify what revisions, decisions, or new actions the LEA will or has implemented to ensure access to a broad course of study for all students.
Yeah, and I think on priority 7, we determined there's nothing really nuanced or tricky about this. But as we're talking about it, it's like, what data do you look at, right? And I think there's an important distinction here between priority 7, which is access to a broad course of study, and priority 8, which is outcomes for that broad course of study. And of course, outcomes are reflected through the college and career indicator on the dashboard, but also through a variety of measures that you report out, individual measures, which we'll get into in the next section. But in determining priority 7, I would definitely look at some suggested metrics that we dropped in there. But this is really getting at, what do you offer students, and really an important need to kind of disaggregate and looking at your data. Do we provide access to all our students for all of our coursework that's available? And of course, the distinction between the grade spans you serve. So if you're a K-8 district, then you certainly don't have the same requirements that you would have for a high school district. And so you don't have to reflect quite as broadly here, but this is one that there's not a lot of nuance, but I think it's really interesting what kind of measures LEAs land on. And I'm curious, just to take a minute, drop in the chat, if you do provide, if you're measuring either, I guess it doesn't matter what your grade levels are that you serve, what do you use currently as a data source to inform Priority 7's local indicator? What are some examples of what you look at to determine if your students have access to that broad course of study? If you don't mind, just drop it in the chat and we will steal your ideas and add them to our tool. Interesting, Jeff. Policy language related to, that's a really good one. Yeah, you're not really, I mean, policy and your board policies and whatnot actually could be considered a data source. CTE course offerings. We've been doing a lot of work with our CTE unit, and I think certainly considering your CTE, and actually Hillary just got back from a WASC visit, and they had a person who, looking at both CTE participation and CTE completers and trying to determine what are the discrepancies or what are the obstacles that may prevent students from completing a CTE pathway. We'll continue to add. I definitely would like to hear more, and especially things like policy. Jeff, you have a question?
I just wanted to mention that my take on this particular indicator is barriers to accessing the course of study. And a lot of schools will say, okay, for this honors course or AP course, you need to have a 3.0 grade point average. You need to have letters of recommendation. And so there's this line, there's this barrier for the child, and that's not 100% access, right? That is an exclusionary policy as opposed to an inclusionary policy. And so it's one thing to look for in a school's policy language. Are there exclusionary policies in place to access certain courses, prerequisites, right? And I taught AP, and I understand that you don't want to take AP calculus if you haven't passed algebra, but you should be able to, with a letter from like a waiver. Basically, it says, I know I've never taken algebra. I know I might get an F. I want to take it anyway. And so having a waiver process, if they have exclusionary policies, is an important way for schools to provide a broad access and yet still have that kind of, the fact that you have to submit a waiver, there's a conversation there about why it's important to have those prerequisites. And so again, it may not be data. I like that you consider it data, but it is something to look for is, do you have these exclusionary policies that restrict a broad course of study, yes or no?
Thanks. I appreciate that, Jeff. That's a great point. And I think it's what the kind of the narratives that would be really powerful, I think, would include that kind of consideration. What kind of obstacles do we present systemically to students having access? I also like to note some of the additional comments here in the chat. Karen notes what's added at the elementary level, and that is always tough. What is a broad course of study for elementary? But yeah, access to music, art, drama, and other supplemental resources or areas. I definitely like looking at disproportionality, Marcy. That's a good case. Looking, sharing, disaggregating the data for enrollment. It's very powerful.
I appreciate Angie's question. What is a broad
Angie, that I'll put that in the chat later. But that's actually defined in Ed Code, and I don't remember off the top of my head what the broad course of study is, but it is specified in Ed Code, and it's differentiated between K through 6 and 7 through 12. So last point here as we move away, and I'm going to transition to our broader metrics. This came up last year. There was a ton of confusion around this. So I just want everybody to, as early as you can, identify your LEA dashboard coordinator. And each LEA has one designated dashboard coordinator, and they're responsible for uploading the local indicators to the dashboard. But just note that this is a different role from the LEA secure accountability coordinator. And I think that the CD really confused people last year by sending out by purging their secure accountability coordinator list and asking for a submission for that around the same time that the dashboard coordinator was going in. And it's easy to understand why people would be confused, but I know as the deadline loomed, and we were working with the CD to try to ensure that everybody had their local indicators uploaded, but there were still LEAs that didn't have or weren't able to access the dashboard because they didn't have the dashboard coordinator identified. So superintendents or charter school administrators are the ones who receive that form, and it goes out using the CDS code. So whoever's identified within the CDS listing that you can check at the CD dashboard is who will receive the form, and then they have to forward that form to whoever their designee is for the coordinator. And then the coordinator will complete that form and submit it. And you can identify an alternate. That would be great practice. So make sure you have that lined up early so you can ensure that you'll get all the information. Marcel, I don't know what the deadline is. Historically, the deadline would be, because things change, a lot of people move on, and you can always change it, of course. But I do believe they sent it out sometime in the summer, like closer to June is when I remember it going out last year. And I'm going to actually ask this year for the CD to provide us with the list of the dashboard coordinators so we can ensure that everybody's got one and that people are aware, try to keep them apprised of the deadlines that are looming. So now I'm going to dive into the LCAP metrics. So we talked briefly about these at our last meeting, but we included this checklist that I think similar tool to what we had before, with a place for you to put your own notes. But really, we wanted to give you a checklist of all the required metrics. So there are 24 metrics that are really kind of specified, and then there are some that are kind of broad, and those determinations around things like access to a broad course of study, where you define what you're going to include in the LCAP, but there should be something in there, and the team will definitely look for that as they're reviewing LCAPs for districts. But what we wanted to provide is here's the required metric, and here's a primary data source or primary data sources where you can find it. And we're going to add to today's, we're going to dive into some of these today to just really get in and show you where to find them, because I don't know that everybody always knows exactly where to go or what we're talking about when we put this. So I'm going to share a screen in a little bit. But what else the other things we included here, besides the primary data sources, if you could generate this with a secondary source like Calpads report, we identify what that report is, and then any additional considerations that might be important to clarify differences or nuances. So I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute. Here are the state priorities, how they measured. So we already talked about all the conditions for learning categories. So they're kind of, these are all the metrics kind of broken up into these three broad categories. Thanks, Jeff. There you go, Angie. Jeff has dropped into the chat the definitions. Very nice of you, Jeff. So conditions for learning, those are the basic conditions, implementation of state standards, and access to a broad course of study, which Hillary just described. So those are all measured by our local indicators. And you'll have to provide some measure of these in the LCAP as well. So of course, fully credentialed, appropriately assigned teachers, that transfers pretty well. Same with the facilities in good repair and the access to standards aligned instructional materials from your Williams report. Boom, those things drift right in. But then you also have to then find, how are you going to measure? What are you going to include in your LCAP to reflect your implementation of state standards? What can you pull out? You're not going to drop in the entirety of the self-reflection tool. That would just be too much, but maybe you're going to find something from your teacher survey that you feel is reflective of your implementation. And then the access to broad courses study, as we've been talking about, what some of the things that were just noted in the chat would be what I would expect an LEA to drop in there. Our second column are the priority areas around engagement. So parent and family engagement, we just talked about with the local indicator. Again, you'll have to pick something out of all the data you collect there that you feel is reflective of what you're capturing in the local indicator process, but it has to be kind of narrowed. Engagement also includes the student engagement that is some hard and fast data points. So attendance rates, chronic absenteeism, middle school dropout rate, the ever elusive middle school dropout rate, high school dropout rate, high school grad rate, and then our school climate. So we definitely just talked about the local indicator, but you also have suspension rates and expulsion rates that are the hard indicators that are accessible. And then finally, student outcomes. And this is an area where we know last year we didn't have a lot of data, right? We didn't have the CASP statewide assessments or the CAST in many cases if it wasn't viable to administer. So you were asked to include a local assessment that was administered. So now this year we're going to actually have these metrics available, the CASP and the CAS will be available. But in addition, the completion of A through G requirements, completion of CT pathway, the real fun one, completion of both A through G and CT pathway, which is actually available this year, unbelievable. Our percentage of English learners making progress towards proficiency. This is a challenging one again, because we haven't had the LPAC in a way, we don't have the metric, right? And so there's a lot of number crunching that takes place within the LP that's hard to do. However, we did develop a tool to generate that, and I believe we linked that in our metrics tool. The reclassification rate, AP exam scores of 3 or higher. The EAP, which is the CASP for 11th grade, serves as a proxy for the EAP. And then finally, the other pupil outcomes for priority 8, which again is kind of a you pick it, and there are a lot to do, but generally things that you find in your college and career indicator are a good place to start, but there are others, and we have those all broken down within the tool. But I just want to make a plug here for measuring progress for all student groups. So I want to say upfront, it's not required that you disaggregate for all students in your LCAP. However, if you're writing an LCAP that serves the needs of all students and you have actions, as is required, that serve the needs of all students within your LCAP, how would you know, or how would your educational partners know that you're making progress if you don't include a disaggregated data for your specific metrics that are included? So these are the metrics that you need to, or these are the student groups that the accountability, state accountability laws require be reported out on: English learners, SED students, foster youth, homeless youth, and students with disabilities, as well as the racial and ethnic groups that are reported out on. I will note one other thing with regards to these. If you do decide to disaggregate some or all of your student groups within your metrics, keep in mind that you may run into some issues around either collecting the data if there are numbers that aren't sufficient for some of the groups. So the state rule on suppression is if a student group has 10 or fewer students, then they suppress the data for student privacy's sake. So if you do have access to student data through, maybe you decide to use Calpads or another report, and you realize as you're starting to report, oh, this student group is very small, I would be reporting out on only 10 students, I would recommend you also follow the rules and suppress that data and don't include it. So at 11 or higher, they will report out on. And this is different from what's reported in the dashboard, which I talked about last time, which is the student group of 30 or more for the broad student groups and 15 or more for the foster youth and the homeless youth. Incidentally, side note for the dashboard, which will be appearing next year, charter schools are, it's one instance where charter schools, they're treated like schools rather than LEAs for the purposes of the numbers of what they include. So they need to have 30 or more foster youth or homeless to be reported out on. It's only at the LEA level that they report 15 foster youth or homeless. Another subtlety, just a quick note on this. So there is a crosswalk that we also included today of comparing the data on DataQuest versus the dashboard. There are some distinct business rules that are used for the collection. Now, historically, there are more, but there aren't a lot of things being reported out on the dashboard right now. So this year's 2022 really focuses on the data, the differences in data around the graduation calculations. And important to know, so the dashboard, California dashboard calculation, it's a blended rate. So it includes a 4-year, 5-year, and if you have a DOS school within your LEA, it's the blended 1 year. So the 4, 5, and 1 year all blended together to give you your graduation rate. That the federal government didn't like that, so they make a distinction there. So DataQuest provides these separate 4-year and 5-year adjusted cohort graduation rates, and they have no 1-year rate available on DataQuest. So that's a big distinction. I'd also note, and this isn't in the crosswalk, but there is a difference in terms of the calculation. You may have noticed if you looked at your college and career measures report, which is part of the dashboard, the available additional reports, that there is a through G, a list, a count of your A through G, and that's so convenient there, right? It's also embedded within the 4-year adjusted cohort grad rate on DataQuest. I would note that those are calculated differently, and you may be kind of in for a little bit of a surprise. The dashboard, which is generally more forgiving, is actually probably going to provide a lower A through G completion rate because it includes in the denominator all students in the cohort, whether they graduated or not, whereas the DataQuest 4-year adjusted cohort only includes your graduates. So it tends to be a little bit higher because the denominator is smaller. So if you're thinking about, oh, well, it's easier to collect the A through G from this great new report on the dashboard, definitely look at what you, first of all, always use whatever you listed as your first, as your baseline metric. That's your priority. But then if you decided, oh, this might be more convenient to collect moving forward, just know that the numbers are probably going to skew a little bit towards in favor of sharing the DataQuest version of this. So just know that, make a distinction. Anjanette, I did say that for the purpose of the dashboard, not for what you report out, but what's reported out on the dashboard for charter schools, they're treated like schools rather than LEAs on the dashboard. So they actually only report out for 30 for foster and homeless, just for the sake of. So if you're looking at an LEA level, reporting out 15 is less problematic because those 15 students may be separated by, across schools. But when you're looking at a school level, it gets more problematic. So they limit for the school level dashboard to 30 or higher for all student groups. And in that case, charter schools are treated like schools rather than LEAs. So some LCAP metrics that are available on DataQuest. Again, I'm going to focus on the primary sources here. There are some duplication, the things that are available on both DataQuest and the dashboard, and you can get them from your Calpads, and you can get them from Student Information System. I'm going to focus on the easy available ones and show you how to get them. So DataQuest, you've got reclassification rate, chronic absenteeism, high school grad rate, within which you have those A through G requirements in the grad rate. The high school dropout rate is there, suspension rate, expulsion rate. Also included on the grad rate, state seal of biliteracy. So you might want to include that in your priority 8 metric, as well as the Golden State Seal Merit Diploma. And I'm going to attempt to share and do a quick little dive into the DataQuest. Here we are in DataQuest. This should hopefully look familiar. You may have done this before. I'm going to dive into the 4-year cohort graduation rates and outcomes. I just want to show you how to access and then also how to filter. So if you decided to disaggregate, that's kind of a key feature here. So I'm going to dive in and I'm going to see, let's see, who's in our group here. I know that Karen's here from La Cañada, so I'm not picking on you, Karen. I just want to look at it. So La Cañada Unified, you want to make sure, sometimes if you have a common, if you have Los Angeles in your name, for instance, you might find that there are a lot of options. The selected district or LEA that's going to give you options in this case. Because I was looking for a district, I only have one La Cañada in the States, makes it easy. So you do have options for school data for the purpose of the LCAP. You really don't need school level data. But I'm going to drill down into the cohort graduation rate. But here's my report. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that there are a lot of counts included here rather than percentages. And I'm going to show you how to switch that, see if you just wanted percentages. But also look what's included in there. You'll note that these little asterisks appear if those are the suppression features. So if there are 11 or 10 or fewer students, they're suppressing data there. But you also note that you can, from this one report, you can see a lot of different features. You can see your graduation rate. You can see your UC A through G completion rate. You can look at your Golden State Seal Merit Diploma and all right, so here is the report. And I just want to show you, so if I'm digging in, I want to make sure, I want to just look at my English learners. If I want to disaggregate, it doesn't offer that. And you've got these filters up at the top. So by clicking on the plus arrows, you'll get a little more detail. You can actually dig into what's included in the report. The glossary here is really helpful for identifying the different component pieces that are included here, such as what is the California High School Proficiency Exam, the Chesapeake, that's part of this report. What's a DOS school? But here's where I really want to get into, it's the filters here. So I want to see how many students, how many English learners are included here. So I want to click on English learners. This is going to filter out all but the English learners, and it will reset here momentarily. And you'll see now it's suppressed everything for the district because individual students. Oh, Karen, I think you have very few English learners in your graduating cohort. I probably picked up a bad example here. Let me try student, and that's okay. English learners would be considered English learners. Actually, they would be considered English learners who are English learners at any point in the 4-year cohort. Let's take a look at students with disabilities instead. We'll refresh. And so this will give me my count of students, right? My students receiving, my special education students who received regular high school diploma, 100% graduation rate. Now, if we wanted to see this, this isn't a super populated area, but if I wanted to see percents up above, I just click on this display options to switch to percents, give it a second to retool. And what I would frequently do is actually just, you can copy this whole table. There's other ways to get this data, but this table can just be copied and dropped into a spreadsheet. So that's a quick drop into into DataQuest to give you just one example of the numerous reports. And I already mentioned there are a bunch of reports here, but kind of works the same way for all of them. If you're trying to break down your student groups, they give you race, ethnicity. They don't give you some of those other groups. There's also a subgroup filter. So I probably should have picked a more robust school district in terms of these groups, and probably slightly bigger. But you also have a subgroup filter to filter for socioeconomically disadvantaged, migrant students. Sorry, I lost there, as well as foster and homeless. So that's where you would get down to drill down if you wanted to break this data down for any of those factors. So let me go back to my PowerPoint here. Okay, so what LCAP metrics are available on the school dashboard? So there's this wonderful, they called it a sister site the other day, from the dashboard. If you haven't seen it, these additional reports and data that are available. And so you can get the high school graduation rate, which is a blended one we were talking about a minute ago. Your completion of A through G requirements is part of that as well. CTE pathway completion. This is where you find that ever elusive CTE pathway and A through G completion. Before that, you would have been left to calculate that on your own. Now they're actually providing that for you. Also offers completion of college credit courses, which may be of interest for your priority 8, your AP exams, your international baccalaureate exams, and your state skill bioliteracy. I just want to note again, as I noted before, there's a different calculation for A through G and state skill bioliteracy than what we were just looking at. So if you choose to gather those measures from there, then just be forewarned, they are different than what you'll see on DataQuest. So let me go back to, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to pull up, I know I saw Kelly showing us from Sentinel Valley earlier. So I'm going to pull up Sentinel Valley here, and you'll note that you get a bunch of choices. So I'm going to dig in to their data here. So once you get to the main dashboard for 2021, you'll note up in the right-hand corner is this View Additional Reports button. And you have the option of either the graduation rate additional report or the college and career measures only report. I'm going to select that one because that's where all this rich data is that people are really excited about. Incidentally, I think the CDE intends to report this data out because people are excited to have it, and they'll report it out moving forward, even after the college and career indicator returns to the dashboard. So here you see that they give you the breakdown of what constitutes the entirety of the graduation cohort. And then you have this example of the advanced placement exams. And I will note also with this advanced placement exams, these are students who scored 3 or higher on at least 2. So it doesn't give you an exact count of students who scored 1 or higher. That data may be available at the College Board, or you may have it in your data information system. And then this actually uses as the denominator your 4-year cohort graduation rate, as does the International Baccalaureate. So there are some strange twists here. But then you get into the completed one CTE pathway, completed A through G requirements, A through G requirements in one CT pathway. So this is a lot of good stuff. Your students who completed college credit courses. So a lot of this can be found, a lot of the required metrics are available in this report. So definitely take a look at that. And I'm mindful of the time here, so I'm gonna speed along. Hillary, if we had any questions?
No, we have not had any questions, and both the metrics inventory tool and the local tool that we just created have been posted and shared in the chat.
Okay. So finally, I just wanted to touch this. I'm not going to go into Calpads just because for student privacy issues, but I just wanted to note there are two metrics that are available only on Calpads. There's really no other way around it. Well, I shouldn't say that. You could gather these also within your student information systems. But as far as kind of what's most readily aligned with what you will ultimately see on the dashboard, attendance and middle school dropout rate, they kind of fell off the radar. The attendance used to be reported on DataQuest. Now chronic absenteeism is, but attendance is not. So there's report 14.2, which will give you everything you need. It does have some additional, you'd have to do some additional calculations, but you do get a total available hours for every student, and they were eligible to be in attendance, and then how many actual hours they were in attendance, a spreadsheet that you can actually generate your attendance so you can see your percentage of attendance. And then the middle school dropout rate, and the tool has descriptions, but the report 8.1 is a report that will give you the status, the exit status for students. And you can work with your Calpads person to identify those students who have an exit code that would be attributed to dropping out. There are 3 exit codes if the student has those. And these are all things that are corrected in the fall. So if you look back at the 2021 data, you'd be able to determine who has those exit codes, because everybody in the state has to update the status of students. So if they reappear, if they weren't in your school district anymore, but you don't know where they went, they may have reappeared at another school district, and their status will be reflected. Your Calpads person will have corrected that to know that they showed up at another public school. And then finally, I just want to note there are 2 great metrics that just came out last, or not metrics, but reports that came out last spring. Reports 15.1 and 15.2. These are accountability reports that are available. So everything you see in these reports is available on the public reporting sites, the dashboard or DataQuest that I just mentioned. But these are great reports if you're looking at analyzing things like your graduation rate or your college and career measures, because you can get a student list. And so if you're curious, who ultimately ended up as a CTE completer and an A through G completer, and why? What was the distinction there that allowed them to do that? You can go back in and work with your staff, your counseling staff, to figure out what obstacles may prevent. If you're trying to do some systemic work around improving these outcomes, that's a great place. I highly recommend this.
Evan, we did have a question that just came in from Jim with regards to their metrics in the LCAP, which was approved for 3 years. We do not want to mix data sources. We're very clear on where we're pulling the data. We're planning to report no data available if, say, a dashboard is not posting. Is LCAP recommending to use different data sources or change metrics? How would this be distinguished in the LCAP?
Great question, Jim. And we talked about this a little bit last time. If you have an existing metric, no, you don't want to abandon it and go to something else, right? There's got to be, you want to maintain that continuity. But I think that you're going to find that you're going to have almost everything now as far as data of the required metrics is now available. They're not all on the dashboard. And maybe, I don't know, you may have used some other measure, but every component parts of the metrics are really available for almost everything now in one way or another. They didn't produce the dashboard, but they did, as I've kind of talked about, provide either a DataQuest report, which they're available, or a dashboard. And the exception would be, if you're CASP, if you didn't administer CASP last year, then you have a local indicator, a local assessment that you want to maintain some continuity, but you'll have to eventually get CASP back up there, and you'll be administering CASP this spring. And so depending on the availability, maybe you won't be able to report the full CASP metrics, but it's not unreasonable to think that you could actually have some in real-time data. The turnaround for CASP in the the California educator reporting system is pretty quick. You start to see results, and you could probably use SIRS. I'm not saying you have to. You could wait another, till the formal results are out, just to ensure that everything's aligned. But yeah, eventually you'll have to get the other metrics back in, and I think the goal would be to have you kind of transition where you have a year where both are visible, and I'll the LCAP team can clarify with you when they're working, but transparency, make sure you just be really clear on this is the metric and this is new and we've added this, and trying to make sure that people know where the metric came from and what it represents. And that's always the best policy. So, something just doesn't disappear and be replaced with something else is key. So you'd have that period where you'd have possibly both appearing. And I think that is it. And it's handing it over to Rachel for the ELCAP overview.
Thank you, Evan. Good afternoon, everyone. So next, we're going to provide a brief overview of the ELCAP system, including how to upload your LCAP for non-ELCAP users, and also how to roll over your plan for ELCAP users. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, all LEAs and charter schools in LA County will submit their 2022-23 LCAP using the LACO ELCAP system. If your LEA does not use the LACO ELCAP system to develop your LCAP, then you will just upload a PDF of your complete LCAP. And the complete LCAP includes the budget overview for parents, the supplement to the annual update, so that was just recently presented to your board last month, the 2022-23 LCAP, the action tables, and also the LCAP instructions. And so the PDF that gets uploaded should be one single file with all of those components in the order listed. For those LEAs that use the ELCAP system to develop the LCAP, the 2022-23 template is now available in the system, so you can now roll over your 2021-22 plan. And the components that will roll over include components from the measuring and reporting results section, the goals and actions section, and also information required for the 2021-22 annual update table and the 2021-22 contributing actions annual update table. And we also have an ELCAP user guide available to support LEAs in using the ELCAP system, and that document is posted with today's materials. Next slide, please. So next, we just wanted to provide a quick overview of the steps to upload a PDF of your complete LCAP for non-ELCAP users. So first, you would need to log into the ELCAP system, or if you don't already have an account, then you would need to register as a new user. And then once you're in the system, you'll click on Manage Plans, which is located on the left menu bar under LCAP. On the next screen, you'll select the orange button that says Add New Plan. Next slide, please. So once you add a new plan, this title page will pop up. You'll need to complete the required fields on this page, which includes the plan title and year, the date of adoption, the LEA type and name, as well as the LEA contact information. At the bottom of the title page, you can see where you will upload the PDF file of your complete LCAP. And the system will only allow you to upload one file, so it's important to ensure that all of the LCAP components are included and also in the correct order as previously mentioned. Next slide, please. So at the bottom of the title page, you'll need to click on the box that says, do you want to use the PDF plan upload? And this will allow you to choose your file to upload. Once you've selected your file, then you'll click on the green cloud button to upload the file. And once the upload completes and you've confirmed that the file name replaces the Choose File button, you can click the Save button. And the final step is to submit the plan. So next you would go back to the plan index, and there you'll see an orange submit button at the top of the screen. And so you'll click on that button to officially submit the plan to LACO. Next slide, please. So next, we wanted to provide a quick overview of the steps to roll over the plan for those LEAs that used the LCAP system to develop the 2021-22 LCAP. So again, you would need to log into the LCAP system, and then if you don't already have an account, you would register as a new user. If you're a new user, you'll also need to be added as a user to the specific plan that you want to roll over. And if there is not someone in your district who can add you to the plan, so for example, if someone left and they were the only one with access to the plan, you can contact your LCAP coordinator for assistance with this process. And once you're in the system, you'll click on Manage Plans. Again, it's on the left menu bar under LCAP. And then the next step is to select the approved 2021-22 plan. So what you see on this screen will vary by user depending on how many drafts were created in the LCAP system. But you should only see one approved plan for the 2021-22 year. And you can confirm this by the last column, which shows the status. So it should say approved in that last column. Next slide, please. So once you've selected the approved 2021-22 plan, you will see this screen that shows the plan index of your 2021-22 LCAP. And at the top of the screen, you'll see the rollover button. So you would just need to click on this button to roll over the plan. And after clicking the rollover button, you should also see a message in green stating that the plan rolled over successfully. Next slide, please. You would then need to go back to the Manage Plans section to find the rolled over plan. And again, you can find the Manage Plans tab on the left menu bar. In the Manage Plans section, the rolled over plan will have the word rollover and the date and time of the rollover in the plan title. And the status will now be draft, as you can see in the sample on the screen. And you can edit this plan title by going back to the title page section in the plan index to change the title of the plan. Next slide, please. So once you click on the rolled over plan, you will see the plan index as shown here in this screenshot. The plan index features all of the sections of the LCAP, and it allows you to navigate through the various sections as you're developing the plan. So you will need to go into each section to enter the information that was not rolled over. There are also some sections in the plan index which you can see have the word preview. These sections are read-only and allow you to preview certain sections of the plan, such as the goals, the data entry table, and also the action tables. The data for the preview sections is actually entered in the data entry for actions tables and the data entry for goals, actions, and budget sections. Many of the features of the LCAP system are the same as last year. However, there are some new components that we'll be taking a quick look at that have been added as a result of changes to the LCAP template and the action tables. Next slide, please. So in the plan index, you'll see a link to the budget overview for parents upload, as well as a link to the supplement to the annual update upload. Both of these components are considered part of the 2022-23 LCAP, but are not completed within the LCAP system. They're completed using the CDE templates and then get uploaded to the LCAP system. For the budget overview for parents, you'll need to convert the template tab of the budget overview for parents into a PDF prior to uploading this document. And to upload a PDF file, you would click the Choose File button to select the PDF, then click the green cloud button to upload the file. A pop-up will appear that shows the progress of the upload, and then once the upload completes, the file name will replace the Choose File button. Next slide, please. So one of the new components that was added to the ELCAP is the data entry for action tables section. And this is a section where you will enter the data for the annual update table, the contributing actions annual update table, and the LCFF carryover table. So when you click on this section, you will see 3 tabs across the top of the page, one for each of the 2021-22 tables that require data entry. So the first tab is the 2021-22 annual update table. And on this page, you will see all of the actions that were included in the 2021-22 LCAP, as well as the total planned expenditures for each action. So all of that information will be rolled over from the previous plan. And so here you will need to enter the estimated actual expenditures for each action. So you would just click on the pencil icon, which will open the field to allow you to enter an amount. And then you would click on the save icon after entering the amount. As you enter and save the estimated actual expenditures for each action, the amount will be added to the total amount at the top of the screen. So you'll see this total change as you're entering and saving the amounts for each action. Next slide, please. The next tab is the 2021-22 Contributing Actions Annual Update Table. And on this page, you'll see all of the contributing actions that were included in the 2021-22 LCAP. So here you will enter the estimated actual LCFF supplemental and/or concentration grants amount for the 2021-22 year, the estimated actual expenditure of LCFF funds for each contributing action included in the 2021-22 LCAP, and also the estimated actual percentage of improved services for contributing actions that are provided on a limited basis only to unduplicated students, and also that does not have any funding associated with the action. So again, to enter these amounts, you'll just click on the pencil icon to open the fields, and then click on the save icon after entering each amount. One thing to remember is that for the estimated actual expenditure amount that you're entering for each contributing action, it's only asking for LCFF funds here. So if you have a contributing action that includes LCFF funds and another funding source such as federal funds, you would only include the LCFF funds here. Another important thing to note is that for the estimated actual percentage of improved services, you will only be able to enter a percentage if the estimated actual expenditures for the action is $0. The system will not allow you to enter a percentage if there is an amount over $0. The other fields shown in the table are either rolled over from the 2021-22 LCAP, or they're auto-calculated based on the data entered. Next slide, please. So the third tab is for the 2021-22 LCFF carryover table. And this table will calculate the LCFF carryover, if any, that will be required to be carried over from the 2021-22 LCAP year into the 2022-23 LCAP. So most of the information in this table is auto-populated or auto-calculated. However, there is one field that LEAs will need to input. So LEAs will need to enter the estimated actual LCFF base grant dollar amount. And then again, to enter this amount, you'll just click on the pencil icon to open the field, and then click on the save icon after entering the amount. Next slide, please. So here we see a screenshot of the data entry for goals, actions, and budget, which includes the data entry tabs for the goals, measuring and reporting results, actions, goal analysis, and budget summary. This section is not a new section in the ELCAP system. However, there are some new components that have been embedded within this section, as well as some components that will be completed for the first time this year. We're not going to be looking at all of these data entry tabs at this time, since the data entry for most of them have not changed from last year. However, one example of something that will be completed for the first time this year is the goal analysis section. And this section includes 4 prompts that will need to be completed for each goal. So on the screen, you can see the first of those 4 prompts. Next slide, please. So something that is new and was added this year to the budget summary section is the data entry for the 2022-23 projected LCFF base grant and the 2022-23 projected LCFF supplemental and/or concentration grants. Previously, this budget summary section provided a view-only summary of the actions and funds included in the plan. And so this section still includes the view-only summary of the actions and funds in the plan. However, at the top of the page, there are also 2 data entry fields that LEAs need to complete. So after the projected LCFF base grant and projected LCFF supplemental and/or concentration grants amounts are entered, then the 3rd field, the projected percentage to increase or improve services for the coming school year, will be auto-calculated. And these 3 amounts on the screen will also be displayed in the action tables. So here we see a screenshot of some of the changes to the increased or improved services section as a result of changes to the template. So for the fields shown on the slide, there is only one field that requires data entry. So LEAs will need to enter the projected additional LCFF concentration grant amount for the 2022-23 school year. So this is the 15% add-on amount. The other fields shown here will not need to be entered. These fields will be automatically populated from the data entered in other sections of the ELCAP, such as from the budget summary section that we just looked at, and also from the LCFF carryover table. And although not shown on the slide, remember that the increased or improved services section also includes 3 prompts and also a new staff to student ratio table that is included in this section in the ELCAP system. So here are a few screenshots of the ELCAP user guide. And the user guide is intended to provide a quick overview of the features and functionality of the ELCAP. And it's important to note that as additional features, resources, or changes occur, this guide will be updated. And it is posted on our website with today's materials, and it can also be accessed within the ELCAP system. And one additional point we'd like to make is that in addition to the user guide, it's important to also reference the CDE LCAP template instructions to ensure that you're fully addressing the LCAP requirements and the prompts. Remember that the prompts are for the readers and the instructions are for the LCAP writers. So if you're just responding to the prompts on the screen in the ELCAP system and not referring to the actual LCAP instructions, you may not be addressing all that's required. So next we have some additional resources to support you in the development of the 2022-23 LCAP. So next slide, please. So here is a screenshot of the 2021-22 timeline for the LCAP process, as well as a screenshot of the summary of legal requirements. And again, both of these documents have been included with today's materials. And here are the links to our LACO LCAP webpage, as well as the links to our Day 1 and Day 2 workshop resources, including the recordings. And finally, we've included links to various CDE resources so that you can have them all on one page. So that concludes our workshop. And a big thank you to Evan and Hillary for sharing all of that great information and the resources on the local indicators and metrics. And also thank you all for joining us today. And if there's any additional questions, please leave them in the chat and we will get the Q&A out as soon as possible with responses. And we've also included our contact information in case you need to reach out to us with any additional questions. So thank you all again.